Thanks, Kyle. Thanks everyone for coming today and for having me out. That was a great photograph to pull on me there. That's good. So, yeah, the theme for this is space, and that's something that I don't really have to work into my talk too much because it's something that I sort of have always been fascinated with, and it's always been a big part of what I've done. So yeah, anyway, this is me as a child, and the world's most frightening Ku Klux Klan bunny rabbit. I was kind of freaked out by a lot of things when I was a little kid, and certainly that was one of them. So as I grew up, this is how I learned to defend myself. And yeah, this is my son, Ellis. You know, I love this picture because I just wish I could feel like that all the time. And this is the last baby joke, but this is him absconding in a chartered plane somewhere in Central America. So yeah, I bring him up for a reason, and I'll get to that in a second, but this is the context of everything, right? This is the Earth. It's at sea in this sort of vast universe. It is sort of the ultimate context, and I feel like if you don't understand the context, it's very difficult to understand what you're doing. And there's something about that image, and I think astronauts have remarked about this quite a bit. This idea that I like to think about as insignificance is significant, right? So a quick show of hands, right? Okay, first off, this is just, because it's early and everything. Show of hands, who is here today? Let's go. Right, it's like a demented roll call. And really, why are you here? And before anyone answers that question, I'm just going to answer it for you. You're here because of Mommies and Daddies, right? Like, everybody's got some parents, and they got together one day, and they started making out, and things happened, right? And what's interesting about that is, when I was fortunate enough to have my son Ellis, we didn't plan it, right? We were lucky enough, as I should say now, that we didn't actually plan it, which is kind of amazing, and it's shocking, right? Because in our worlds, in our lives, we like to think that we're in control of everything and that we've got everything mapped out, right? Which also happens to put a lot of pressure on people. But really, this isn't crazy at all. There's been accidental babies happening for millions of years. In fact, the majority of people who have ever been born were completely by surprise. I mean, not total surprise, because we all know what we're doing when we're doing that stuff, but... So, 3 million years is sort of the estimated timeline for human existence. And if you think about it, across that timeline, there's been about 10,000 years where the human race sort of coalesced into these agricultural societies that we have today. Which kind of means that 99.997% of all of human existence, people were running around gathering food and hunting and stuff, and nature wasn't under their control. They weren't concerned about growing stuff. And their workday was estimated to be about 2.5 hours. That's kind of interesting, right? Because why would you go through all that trouble? The food was just right there. And then 0.003% of human existence has occurred in this 10,000 years. We're growing crops, we're controlling nature, and somehow that workday becomes over 10 hours. And within that 10,000 year timeline, so now we're zooming in on that, right? Our way of life, as I've defined it, right, which is totally not up to me, but for the sake of this talk it is, as this little sliver here, this 300 years, the last 300 years, which is 0.001% of all of human existence. And within that time frame, that's the industrial revolution started about 300 years ago, capitalism about 160 years ago, control over reproduction is really new, and that's about 160 years old, and television, internet, etc. So what that means is that 99.9999% of all human existence looked utterly different than it does in this moment in time. And you think about what that means. I mean, everyone's flown in airplanes, and this is a series of photography that I've been doing when I've been up in the air. And you can just see by looking down that we've completely transformed the face of the planet. And it's crazy. It's been a very short amount of time that that's happened. And the interesting thing about that to me is that no one can pretend to understand what the hell the right thing is to do, right? Like how you're supposed to behave, what you're supposed to strive for. Like, for instance, it's sort of like the rules of the culture, right? What do I do after I graduate from college? Do I find a wife? Do I buy a car? Do I get the best job possible? Do I make as much money as... All that, that's all kind of nonsense. And a way to think of this, to me, is also is like, I was watching a dinosaur documentary, and I'd always believed that the Earth, I mean, if you had said to me the Earth has always had a North Pole, I'd be like, yeah, of course. The North Pole, right? In the time of dinosaurs, the Earth was actually wobbly, and it had several North Poles. And it took 380 days to get around the sun. And it was a hell of a lot hotter, right? So this idea that there's like a set way that things have happened, or a set way that things should happen, is a bunch of nonsense. This is a big statement right here. The rules are totally dumb. Well, it's all a giant experiment, but we like to pretend like it's not. And what does that mean for you? Well, in this experiment, we've whittled our thinking time down to about 2 hours from 13 hours in prehistorical times. Oh, we've added TV and smartphones and video games, so that steals about 6 hours a day from people. Which is crazy when you think about it, because we don't know what that will do to people, but that's all fine, we're evolving with it. But most of that is chasing someone else's idea. And when I think about how I look at my work, it's important to me that I feel like I have my own perspective, and that I have some place that I'm starting from. That's mine. And that takes time. But the beautiful thing about Insignificance, and why it is so significant, is that it gives you the ultimate freedom. There really isn't anything to live up to. That's all in here, right? Well, this is just my idea. Okay. But if you go with this insignificance, and if you recognize your uniqueness, because that's really what it is, you're extremely unique. And if you weren't, and if you were everything to everyone, you'd be like the air or something, and that's boring, and everyone forgets about that. Right? So this idea of freedom and the ability to take chances and just do something, it's profound. These rules, again, were created during one millionth of human existence. This idea that we have the four walls in this room and fluorescent lighting, and all this stuff is extremely bizarre. So, in my little micro world, I've been attending band practice for 22 years of my life, which is completely ridiculous. And by no means is that sort of part of anyone's ordinary plan, I don't think. This is what band practice looks like. Pretty much the world over. Just squint, and it could be any band. It started when I was 15, and I knew exactly how to pose. It's hilarious. Like the first photograph I've ever had anything like this done, and I turned sideways, and I had a very thoughtful look on my face. In the 90s, things got a little fuzzier. This is band photos through the ages. In the 2000s, I just didn't care what I looked like. But being in a band is funny. It's like the ultimate American experience. It's like it's like a bunch of cowboys. Like you're doing your thing. It's kind of funny. It makes me laugh sometimes because I've spent so much time with it. This idea that it's like a band of brothers, and really what a band is an excuse to hang out with your friends. Yeah, wait. Sure, just why not have a chicken head in there? And then you're 35, and you're crotch deep in Lake Michigan. Like, really? This was snapped right after that. Things got scarier. And then this is literally last year, and look, I've got the same... I'm still doing it. So I've made a lot of art. So my other big interest was artwork, and I went to college for photography. When I graduated college, I was doing work that looked like this, and it was sort of about this kind of this idea of this exploratory idea, this very thing that I'm talking about, this odd questioning of where I stand and where the universe is, and where to head, where to go. I don't know. And since I was a little kid, this was basically my first experience with graphic design, I think. And I was never interested in design until I graduated from college, and I figured out that there wasn't a whole lot to do with my photography degree. And I didn't like assisting for commercial photographers, and I was looking for something else. And when I was a little kid, I had this image of this Van Halen logo and this diver down symbol, and I had this tape, and I took both of them, and I took a poster that I didn't like, that was about 18 by 24, flipped it over, and I drew in magic markers. I recreated both of these images on posters, and I hung them in my room. And I think that was basically my first sort of attempt to do some kind of design work. And so naturally, my bands always needed album covers, so I didn't have a computer, but I started to do stuff with just collage and a typewriter. And about a year later, so I'm 25 now, I decided I'm going to quit my job and start some Untitled with a very good friend of mine named Dawn Hancock, who now runs Firebelly. And at the same time, I decided that I would start a record label, why not, so I could put out my band's music. This makes sense. And my photography changed a bit. I started shooting with more commercial equipment, like a Hasselblad, but I still was sort of interested in this, exploring space. And some would say quite still and empty and quite these very stark images of landscapes and urban environments. And this stuff found its way into my work. This is my band's second release. All of this was shot at O'Hare Airport, which is now completely impossible to do. But literally, I was walking around at 4 a.m. with a tripod and a Hasselblad, taking pictures all across the airport without a single person asking me what I was doing. But that was the year 2000. So yeah, Some Odd Pilot is, as Kyle was mentioning, is a design studio and a branding agency, and it's grown quite a bit since then. Since 2008, actually since Ellis was born, we've been doubling in size nearly, and so things have changed a lot, and it's been quite exciting. We're obviously located in Chicago. This is what the studio looks like. Next door to our studio, we have a gallery called Public Works that, really was established to kind of push this idea of a new and an emerging art form that I think is really important. It's sort of like this design-informed artwork. And so we feature artists from around the world. I'll get more into that later. But the team is actually not very large. There's 7 of us typically that do all these things because, as everyone knows who's ever works in a small shop, you have to wear many hats. One thing that I think that's interesting about our studio is that along with this list of, this insane list of activities or responsibilities, is this notion that, like, you know, being a startup or a small company, and, you know, primarily I ran things by myself or with a partner for the first 7 years, and you kind of get this, you sort of get this idea in your head that you're going to tackle everything, and like our team is really robust at, like, we take concepts from this from zero all the way through execution a lot of times. So this is us in various places, like in the mountains of San Diego and in wine country in Italy, in the back of an El Camino, right? Shooting some action sports. But this idea that, like, I think, you know, was imparted on me and everyone that works at Some Odd Pilot is this idea that nothing sells better than the truth. Like, nothing resounds or resonates louder than something that's actually true. And if you're gonna say it, you gotta say it with gusto, right? You gotta make that thing sing. It's gotta be epic. It's gotta be inspiring. It's gotta be huge. So a lot of the work that we've done in the beginning was for the music industry. That's Leaky Lee, Chairlift, some Chicago bands. And of course that work helps you explore a lot of different working methods, a lot of different techniques. Doing band portrait, this is not Photoshop, these guys just jumped in the air and I flashed the great big flash. Hollywood Holtz and Hey Champ. These were all shot at the Lollapalooza Festival a few years ago for a magazine, and I had this opportunity to do this, and I thought, I'm going to do everything I can to make these portraits and not to end up just with these sort of editorial pics. So this is Bass Nectar, Joshua, James, and Cage the Elephant. So a lot of this work also has parlayed onto the internet, where like we've built digital stores for labels like Fat Possum. This is James Eha, this is Smashing Pumpkins guitarist. Had a new record out last year, I think, and we built this site for him. Sound Opinions, this is a not yet launched identity that's coming out in 2 weeks, where we rebranded the popular WBEZ talk show. You guys familiar with that? Sound Opinions? Yeah, I'm excited about that one. This idea that they wanted to sort of open up the concept of the show to beyond just Jim and Greg, but they also wanted it to be about a conversation with everyone else in the audience. This is my band on stage. Yes, we have a fog machine. And we're grown men. I shot this image in Mexico while I was teaching a class on album cover design, of all things. And then when it came time to make a big, bad, scary metal album cover for our first release, it became this. This idea of triangles sort of overtook the whole mission. The triangle shape of the beak is sort of the idea there. The logo was designed by my friend Justin Fines from New York. This is some early concepts. It's a little bit dark on the screen. Let's see if I can. No? Okay. But this is some early concepts I have for our next record, which is about the beginning of time, naturally. These are some outer space photographs by an actual NASA astronaut that were incorporated and sort of acted in this collaboration for this release called Personal Space, which is a compilation of electronic soul, from 1974 to 1984. And I think it really has this sort of like beautiful intimacy and great distance built into it, just with these sort of flares that we kind of built into the sleeve. This is diverse. So the record label owner called me up and he's like, "Yeah, I've got this idea. I want to put the artist in a New York phone booth, and then I want to just drop that phone booth on random corners in Chicago." This is the kind of crap I get all the time, where it's like, "What?" Like, we're not going to get a permit for that, which is really, really common. Like almost everything I've ever done in my life has not been done with the proper permits. But Jesus, like a 500-pound telephone booth is something else. But you'd be amazed. So he puts out an ad in Craigslist, and he's like, "Anybody want to help on this hip-hop shoot? We're going to be doing it at 5 a.m., show up, you'll get paid $50 or whatever." And like 5 dudes from the west side of Chicago showed up to pick this phone booth up and get it out of the van and put it back in really fast. And so here we are on Fulton, I think down by Fulton Street, and like there's electricity running out of a car across the street here, lighting the head of a strobe that's in the bottom of the phone booth. And then the rest is just, a little bit of Photoshop to take out that cord, which is here. I really like the way this turned out, like the sense of space. I've been accused often of making my images just as much about the space as the subject that's in the image. And looking back at some Blue Note records, we kind of had this idea for this kind of like hand-cut manipulation of trade Gothic to do all of the type styles. That's something that's very common in our studio, is to either manipulate typography that's familiar or to create our own for a project like this. I think for album covers, they kind of demand a lot of originality. They demand an iconic and memorable both image and type treatment. So yeah, this is completely crazy. Like there's traffic coming around and driving over the electrical cord that's running across the street. It was insane. But it worked, and not a single police officer said a thing. So I think being an agency in the 2000s, to me it's completely natural that digital is part of that. I mean, I don't see how you could be a designer in this day and age without understanding the digital space. And so for our agency, that's just sort of a natural part of what we do. So we do a lot of work in web and mobile, and we have for since 1999, since we opened. Caterpillar has become a big client of ours, that we've actually redone their apparel and footwear site 5 times since 2007. We recently relaunched Merrill.com in February, where we reimagined the branding alongside their branding agency and translated that onto the web, moving that brand kind of into a more outdoor athletic space. And then of course that has to get carried across mobile. And then we also manage their monthly updates and to keep the site fresh. We build all of these different pieces. Some of this is our own work, like this is something that we went and shot in Italy, and a lot of it is done by their photographers, and it's our job to sort of shape that content into the branding messages every month. Yes, we actually did do very appropriate work for this talk for the spaceship company. They actually build spaceships for Virgin Galactic, one of Richard Branson's enterprises. And then WorkSpring is a steelcase company. This is just a smattering of some branding, both used and discarded for various companies. Pitchfork was one of our sort of initial forays into the public spotlight. I feel like in 2004 they were up in Rogers Park, and we were sending them records, and it took an intern to go, "Oh hey, those guys also design stuff and websites." And then the owner, who I'd already known, gave me a call and he's like, "Is that true?" And I said, "Yes." And then I was like, "You have to have a logo." And that was an interesting conversation because at that time he was such a DIY guy. He was doing all of the design himself. He was coding all the pages himself, and he had like 10,000 hand-coded pages at that point. And the branding just kind of changed every time he designed it, like whatever he wanted to put in the corner, he would just put. So that was interesting. So we had to kind of jam that branding into like basically a 2-week project to redesign and give Pitchfork its first actual proper web design, and also its logo, which has survived the ages. Public Works branding, this is for our gallery. The idea with Public Works is like, in my mind, fine art has like left the masses behind, and so I wanted to create a gallery where there was an immediate connection to the average person. And to me, that means, I think of like the initial inspiration for that was something like, was album covers, really. And seeing how like there is this, or book covers, or this kind of transcendence between the two mediums where one can't say that it's art entirely, and one can't say that it's design entirely. So the website that we've created for this has this idea of bringing you into that exhibit by making the exhibition pages completely unique to each show, simply by dropping in an image in the background from that exhibit that just puts you right in there when you hit the page. We were exceptionally honored to have Storm Thurgeson in a show last September. We did a retrospective of his work, and he flew out from London. He's the designer of all the Pink Floyd album covers, from Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, everything. He's done over 500 album covers in his life, and he's like a living legend. So yeah, this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is sort of just a nice culmination of some of our talents or some of our approaches. So Merrill came to us with something that they wanted to reboot, a series of shoes and hiking boots from the 80s to celebrate their 30th anniversary. And so they were calling it Merrill Origins, and they asked us to bring that sort of campaign to life, you know? And so we went back just simply to where it started, where the brand started, and in the 80s, it was Randy Merrill who launched the company simply because he wanted to make an awesome hiking boot. And in the 80s, hiking wasn't something everyone did yet. It was really the birth of outdoor recreation and this idea of making it sort of a thing to do. And the inspiration came from Europe, and nobody in America was really making a hiking boot for the US. He's an incredible craftsman, and to this day, he's out in Maine somewhere, and you can go and study, or you can go and camp with him, and he studies how you walk for a week, and he builds a shoe for your foot. So we took our inspiration from the 80s and from current, sort of the current fashion arena, and built this campaign that we went out to Telluride to shoot. All the models were friends of ours that we gathered through Facebook and showed the client their options via Facebook pictures. And the nice thing about non-model models is they look a little more real. This guy looks almost like a Marlboro Man, which is crazy. He's a student at UIUC. And we designed the shoe boxes while we were at it. We shot some panoramas while we were on location that we just stitched around the shoebox, creating by far the largest Photoshop file that I've ever dealt with. Did you know that there's a 2 gig limit on your Photoshop files? You simply can't have a bigger file than that. And for Colette's in Paris, this fancy fashion boutique, we did a special edition box where we made it black. It was really important that this campaign engaged younger people because, to be honest, younger people are spending less and less time outdoors, and so the brands that base their business in the outdoors are very concerned about this. And so there is this effort going on to sort of appeal to younger people, and so I think that was why we were given the job, because it was ascertained that we had a decent rapport with talking to that age group. And so we reskinned the Merrill.com site to look fashioned around the origins concept, and we laid out the ads. This actually is the wife of our account director now. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is sort of a great picture to end at, because at the end of the day, this is sort of what I was talking about at the beginning. It's just like you're standing at the rim, and you're sort of surrounded by the enormity of it all. And to me, that's really inspiring. Thanks.